Sometimes people don't understand you, not because you're wrong, not because you're toxic, not because your intentions are impure, but because your presence changes the emotional balance in rooms you didn't even know were fragile. Sometimes the misunderstanding isn't about what you did, it's about what you represent. And when someone they love feels deeply connected to you, that connection can stir up fear in places that were once comfortable. Closeness is powerful. It rearranges dynamics. It exposes insecurities. It forces people to confront emotions they've been avoiding. And when someone new becomes important, especially in a way that feels meaningful and transformative, it can make others feel displaced, not replaced, just unsettled. And unsettled people often reach for labels to regain control. So if you're reading this right now, I need you to listen with your heart open because something shifted last night around your name. Something surfaced that your person has been subconsciously ignoring for a long time. And it was emotional. It was tense. It was revealing. It exposed a truth about the so called third party that has been quietly influencing the story between you. Your person went out last night. Nothing dramatic, just a casual evening, some music, some laughter, a few drinks to loosen the stress that's been sitting heavy on their shoulders. They weren't planning to think about you. They weren't planning to defend you. They certainly weren't planning to confront anyone. But your name entered the room anyway. It started small, a side conversation, someone joking about relationships, another person chiming in with opinions, the kind of loud, exaggerated confidence that alcohol gives people. And then, almost carelessly, your name slipped into the dialogue. At first, it was subtle, a comment wrapped in humor. Then a sharper tone followed. One friend said, "You know what? They're kind of a thorn in your side." And it wasn't playful. It wasn't concerned. It was pointed. They continued, saying you make your person uncomfortable, that you poke at their insecurities, that you challenge them too much, that you make them question themselves, that you bring up things they'd rather ignore. They framed you as pressure, as trouble, as someone who complicates their peace. But here's what mattered. It wasn't just what they said, it was how they said it, with certainty, with almost satisfaction, like they'd been holding that opinion in and were finally relieved to release it. Your person didn't explode. They didn't yell. They didn't cause a scene. They went quiet. And sometimes quiet is louder than shouting. Their grip tightened around their glass. Their jaw stiffened. Their breathing slowed in that way it does when someone is trying to control rising emotion. Because when that friend called you a thorn, it didn't just insult you, it struck a hidden nerve. Not because you're harmful, but because you touch the parts of your person that are still healing. You see, your person carries a wound they don't openly talk about. The wound of not feeling enough, the fear of disappointing people, the anxiety of being judged, the quiet suspicion that maybe they're falling behind, maybe they're failing in ways they don't admit. And when that friend said, "Do you make them feel small?" It collided with that fear because sometimes growth feels like exposure, and sometimes love that encourages accountability feels like criticism to someone who isn't used to being seen clearly. Your person's silence stretched across the table. The room shifted. Even those who weren't fully listening felt it. Finally, they said it in a controlled voice, "Don't talk about them like that." The table quieted. The friend laughed nervously, trying to soften it. "Relax. I'm just saying, I care about you." But your person leaned forward slightly. "You don't get to call them a thorn when you don't even know what they've done for me." That's when the truth started peeling back. Instead of apologizing, the friend doubled down. They framed their criticism as protection. They claimed they were looking out for your person. They insisted you were influencing them in unhealthy ways. And your person, who has been wrestling internally for months, finally said something they've been too conflicted to voice. "You're not protecting me. You're bothered." There it was. The shift. Because the truth wasn't about you being harmful. It was about you being impactful. You see your person. You notice when they deflect. You sense when they're overwhelmed. You challenge them when they slip into self-sabotage. You don't let them hide behind charm or avoidance. You hold up a mirror, and mirrors make insecure people uncomfortable. To someone who benefits from your person staying small, your presence feels like pressure. To someone who wants to remain the most influential voice, your closeness feels threatening. To someone who's used to being the emotional center, your impact feels like displacement. But here's what your person realized in that moment: you don't make them feel bad, you make them feel seen. And being seen is terrifying for someone who has survived by staying guarded. Your person stood up briefly, stepping away from the table to breathe. Not because they were ashamed of you, not because they agreed, but because they needed to process what was happening. When they came back, calmer but resolute, they said something that changed everything. They're not a troublemaker. They're a reminder that they can grow, a reminder that they deserve better than self-doubt, a reminder that they're capable of emotional depth, a reminder that love doesn't have to be shallow or convenient. One friend muttered, "That's exactly it. They make you feel like you're not doing enough." And your person shook their head. "No, they make me feel like I can do more." That distinction matters. The friend's face shifted, just slightly. A flicker of something that looked less like concern and more like resentment. And your person caught it, because sometimes jealousy doesn't show up as obvious hostility. Sometimes it disguises itself as protective advice. Sometimes it hides behind phrases like, "I just don't trust them." Eventually, that exact sentence came out. "I just don't trust them," the friend said. And your person replied quietly, "You don't trust them, or you don't trust me?" The pause that followed answered everything. The real fear wasn't that you're dangerous. The real fear was that you're meaningful, that you influence your person's decisions, that your voice matters, that your presence softens them, that your absence would be felt, that you could become permanent And permanence shifts power. Some third parties don't want romance with your person. They want importance. They want to remain the closest advisor, the first call, the strongest influence, the one whose opinions carry the most weight. When you appeared, you didn't try to compete. You simply connected, and connection rearranged priorities. Your person started thinking differently, reflecting more, healing slowly, questioning old habits, setting subtle boundaries. That kind of evolution unsettles anyone who preferred the previous version of them. So they labeled you a thorn, but you were never a thorn. You were the medicine that stings before it heals. You were the truth that disrupts denial. You were the love that doesn't enable self destruction. And that kind of love will always threaten anyone who benefits from emotional stagnation. Last night, something important happened. Your person drew a line. They didn't publicly declare devotion. They didn't romanticize the moment. But in a room full of voices, they chose to defend your character. That is private loyalty. And private loyalty is powerful. Does that mean everything is fixed? No. Your person is still human, still navigating pride, fear, vulnerability, still learning how to balance their heart with their comfort zones. But a boundary was set, and once a boundary is spoken out loud, it's hard to ignore. Your person saw the pattern, the subtle comments, the small seeds of doubt planted over time, the way your name was framed as a problem instead of a presence. And they questioned it. That questioning is growth. So if you've been feeling misunderstood, judged, or painted as too much, let this truth settle in your spirit. You are not too much. You are depth in a world that prefers surfaces. You are accountability in a space that rewards avoidance. You are emotional clarity in dynamics built on convenience. And not everyone can handle that. The wrong people will call your love intense. The insecure will call it pressure. The threatened will call it manipulation. But the right heart will call it home. Take a slow breath. Let go of the labels that were created by someone else's fear. Repeat this quietly to yourself. I am valued for the love I bring. I am not a burden. I am not a threat. I do not need to shrink to make others comfortable. I will not carry accusations born from insecurity. My presence is intentional. My love is honest. My heart is steady. And if last night was the beginning of truth surfacing, trust that clarity is unfolding, even if it's gradual. Growth is rarely loud. It's often a quiet decision made in a noisy room. Your person made one of those decisions. They chose respect over silence. They chose reflection over agreement. They chose to question the narrative instead of absorbing it. And that matters because love that survives interference becomes stronger. Love that withstands misunderstanding becomes clearer. Love that is defended in private becomes real. So stand firm in who you are. You were never the thorn. You were the turning point.